All right, so in college algebra, you saw the idea of a relative max and min. Just to quickly review that, what happens with a relative max or min is that you restrict to a particular x interval. So as a motivating example here, like let's say that this is your profit function. Again, like if you think about like COVID restrictions, things of that nature, you might not be able to see the entire profit function. You might only, like maybe like for social distancing periods of time and so on, you might only be able to see this portion of your profit function. So if that's the case, you are going to be very interested in this point here as a max profit point. And because that is restricted to just a portion of the graph, that is known as a relative max. Now, the same thing would be true if you had to restrict even further. If you were restricting just to this portion of the graph, then this peak point would be a max, but it's not an absolute max over the entire interval. It is just relative to that interval. So when I restrict to that region, I see that this is the highest point. So that would be known as a relative max. The same thing could be said if I looked over here and I restricted just to this portion of the graph. That is the highest point. So this would also be a relative max. So you'll notice with these relative maxima, you could potentially have many of these relative max. You might just have one, but you could also have many relative maxima. Now, in comparison, we have what we call the absolute max or min, and absolute is over the entire domain. So over all of the domain, what is the highest point? So when you're looking at this graph, what is the highest point? Well, it is this point right here. So you'll notice that this point is double playing. It's playing as a relative max and it's also playing as an absolute max. The thing to remember about the absolute max is there's only one absolute max. You're not going to have multiple absolute max that are different numbers. There's only going to be one. So in general, relative is when you restrict to just a portion of the graph, and then absolute is when you look over the entire domain. Do also notice you will see these words minima and maxima appear throughout the section, and those are just plural. So when you have more than one, they're plural for minimum and maximum. Another key definition thing that's really important, you guys, throughout this section, we are going to refer to it as max and min, but you will also see cases where they'll throw out this word extrema. And this is a $1,000,000 word here, extrema. This just means the max min of the function. You will also hear people refer to that in plural as extrema, and you will also hear them refer to it as the extreme values. And when you hear those three, or when you're looking for those three quantities, they are all the same. So saying find the max min is the same as finding the extrema. It's the same as finding the extreme value. So those are all of the same idea.